Okay, so we are now to video 9, Noah and the animals and the ark, and the really super violent story of when God got ticked off and he killed everybody. Okay, I love this story. Now, we just saw with Adam how Adam was in the garden, which represented a temple. He was expelled from the temple, okay? Because ultimately God had a role designed for Adam, and Adam said, I don't want it, and walked away. This is so important for authentic love. You have to have the option to walk away. Caveat here, that's what hell is. When we talk about heaven and hell, we teach often children that like hell, bad, heaven, good. You know, try to get over here instead of over here. But the ultimate understanding of what heaven is a full communion with God. Hell is the decision to be separate, okay? There you go. That's it. Now, I don't want to downplay that, but ultimately I need you to understand that point too as we continue to go through this. Okay, so Noah's Ark. Is Noah a historical figure? Is he real? Maybe, I don't know. Could be not. We don't need to focus on that because ultimately what you'll end up doing is going to the Creationist Museum in Kentucky and being like, wow, the whole world was flooded and thank goodness that Noah saved 2 of every animal so that they could incestuously repopulate the earth. No, we don't do that, okay? A little bit more rational when we come to scripture. Now, we know that the flood narrative of Noah is taken from the Ballad of Gilgamesh, the epic of Gilgamesh, okay? The Epic of Gilgamesh was written in Mesopotamia, a very flood-prone environment. So they were flooding all the time, okay? So like the Persian Gulf, the waters would rise and flood the whole area. Ultimately, people tried to make sense of what was happening. Okay, our environment is flooding, and for whatever reason, people have naturally been drawn towards worship or to a god. And that was how they developed an understanding. The Epic of Gilgamesh is a polytheistic story. So there's multiple gods. There's good gods and bad gods, and they're kind of fighting with each other. And one of them wants to kill Gilgamesh, so they're flooding the earth, and Gilgamesh survives with helps from other gods. But anyway, it's this whole story. This is very common for people to look at their environment and be like, what the heck's happening here? And they try to explain it, okay? Doesn't mean it's historical. It's a story. So what happened was the authors in Genesis, and I'm saying plural authors, because even though it is credited to being written by Moses, we don't know for sure. Most likely it was multiple people. So that story of the Epic of Gilgamesh was adapted to tell a different type of story for a more monotheistic culture. And this is what happens. So God looks at, you know, his creation, and he was like, people have nothing but evil in their hearts. They only want to hurt each other. There's no love. I made a mistake with creating them. I'm going to destroy all of them. But he saw Noah, and he was like, that guy is righteous. And when we talk about righteous, what that means is lives in right relationship. Okay, it's not like I'm righteous, like, you know, whatever. It means that he is in right relationship. So when we say that word righteousness, that means that your mind is set to being in an appropriate relationship with God, okay? So we'll unpack that a little bit more later. But Noah is interested in right relationship. He lives a righteous life. And so God's like, I'm going to flood everybody, but I want to save Noah and his family. So he tasks Noah, who lives in a desert area, which makes it even funnier that he was like, build a big boat. But Noah is instructed to build this gigantic boat and take 2 of every animal, put them on board. At one point, I think the story even switches and said 6 of every animal, and then it goes back to 2. But put them on the boat, and I'm gonna save y'all. So Noah does this. The animals and his family, they're all in the boat, and you know, all of creation is wiped out. Now, the boat is very symbolic and also points us to Jesus, because the boat becomes a new garden, a new temple. Okay, so we go from the Garden of Eden to now Noah's Ark. So we get a new temple, and this time Noah is occupying that space as the priest. When they finally find dry land, and if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, if you can Google it, you can put Epic of Gilgamesh flood narrative. And you'll, it should pop up. I think it's the 14th tablet, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But actually some of the wording is extremely similar, because what Noah does when he is getting anxious and he's ready for land, he sends birds out to hopefully collect leaves or twigs or something like that to show that the water's receding. Gilgamesh does this also. He sends out a dove, he sends out a raven, it's the exact same thing. And ultimately the water recedes, they land, and they come out. And then the first thing that Noah does is he makes a sacrifice offering to God, which again, it's a little amusing because you're like, you just carried those animals on that boat for 40 days and then you killed them immediately when he got off, but you know, whatever. So the boat lands, they get off the boat, and they're tasked with pretty much the same task that Adam and Eve had, repopulate the planet. Now, just like Adam ate fruit, and that's what caused his fall, his breaking of his covenant with God, Noah, he enjoys fruit in a different way. He gets off the boat, plants a vineyard, makes himself wine, gets drunk, and gets butt naked in front of everybody, and ultimately breaks his relationship with God because he exposes himself. So what happens is he's naked, his sons see him, and he ultimately curses Canaan, one of his sons, who wasn't even really responsible for any of this. But what we understand that as, the authors at that time had Canaanite slaves, and this was their justification for being allowed to own the Canaanites. So it's in scripture. Does that make it something we should do or allow? Absolutely not. We have to remember that these stories are written by men. They are meant to, tell us something though. They're inspired by God, okay? But what the men actually wrote is not necessarily something we should copy, okay? So this is what makes scripture very difficult, and this is also what causes a lot of violence to come from people who claim to be Christians, because they're like, in the Bible here it says slaves, so bring it on. No, you can't do that, okay? This is, again, scripture is very, very complicated. So Noah ultimately breaks his covenant with God. And so then we move on, okay? What the Old Testament is about ultimately is we see God seeking. This is God on a journey to find that communion with people, to find that relationship with people. And it's kind of a beautiful narrative, but you have to attack it with a mentality of, this is not necessarily meant to be historical. This is not scientific. Does history weave its way through scripture? Yes, there are historical things in scripture. That's not its point, okay? The inspiration is the point, what this is trying to tell us. So far we've had Adam and Noah, two covenants, two arms being stretched out by God, wanting that right relationship with people. And originally people were like, heck yeah. And then we're like, never mind, I changed my mind. So that's where we're going. So with Noah, what I want you to write about in your journal is, how does this connect with Christ? What is the symbolism here that we're seeing? Because again, remember, Christ is going to fulfill this. So Noah no longer fits in the temple. Christ will come to do that, okay? So next video is going to be about Abram/Abraham. Bye.